We do have a quorum, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start, at least get the hellos and all that done. And then, and then once we do that, you'll bring up the local law C on
Yeah.
the shared screen and we'll take off. Great. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee meeting. It is April 6, 2022. At tonight's meeting, we will be discussing, among the council members only, local law C, which has to do with police reform. Joining us tonight, we have committee members, Jack Flynn, Alfredo Ballerin, and council, and then others include Council President Corey Ellis, Council Member Deborah Zammer, and Alfredo, did I introduce you? Council, I think I did. Okay.
Yes, you did.
Good. Just want to make sure. All right. And we also have Council Member Hyde Clark.
And Councilmember Johnson.
And Council Member Johnson. Thank you. One of the sponsor of the legislation. All right. Do you want to go ahead and we'll bring that up, Ethan? I think it was on page 3 is where we left off. So for tonight's meeting, again, I'm going to stress that we're holding off on public comments. There will be future meetings where we will invite the public, both via coming in and talking or by sending in letters and emails, and we will read them into the record. And we're also joined by Council Member Sergio Adams. Okay, so we had left off on section 3. So we'll start with that. It's going to be section 342-69, legislative intent. The City of Albany envisions a public safety commission that decouples public safety from policing centers, community voices, and ends systematic racism. The commission embraces 4 pillars of procedural justice: treating people with dignity and respect, giving citizens a voice during encounters, being open and transparent in decision-making, and conveying trustworthy motives. The Public Safety Commission will ensure the elevation of the concepts of community policing into the practice of public safety. The guiding principle of the Public Safety Commission is sanctity of life. That is at the core of officers' responsibilities. It is the duty to protect all human life and physical safety. And we move down to section 4270, definitions. Chief of police shall mean the chief of police of Albany's Police Department. Department of Public Safety, department established under Article 11 of the Code of the City of Albany. Immediate relative. For purposes of this article, immediate relative shall refer to a spouse, child, stepchild or sibling, parent or step-parent, mother, father, son, daughter, brother or sister-in-law, or any individual who lives in one's household, except for tenants and household employees. Section 42-71, commission established. Appointment of members and their qualifications. There is hereby established a Public Safety Commission with 3 principal responsibilities: oversight of the Albany Police Department, administration of the Department of Public Safety, and ensuring public access to information about policing and public safety practices in the City of Albany. The Public Safety Commission shall be comprised of 9 members, 5 of whom shall be appointed by the Common Council, and 4 of whom shall be appointed by the mayor. Members of the commission shall serve for a term of 3 years. Terms shall be staggered, so 3 members begin their terms each year. If a member leaves office before expiration of their term, their successor shall be appointed to complete the remainder of the term. Eligibility requirements: all members must be residents of the City of Albany, current employees of the City of Albany, and current and former employees of the Albany Police Department shall not be eligible to serve as members of the commission, nor shall any immediate relative or current city employee or current or former police department employee be eligible. An immediate relative shall refer to a spouse, child, stepchild, sibling, parent, or step-parent, parent-in-law, child-in-law, or sibling-in-law, or any other individual who lives in one's household, except for tenants and household employees. If a question is raised about whether a candidate for member of the commission is an immediate relative of a current city employee or current or former police department employee, the appointing authority shall resolve that question. E, candidates for a public safety commission shall be subject to a public hearing prior to commencement of their term. Reappointments shall be subject to a public hearing. Candidates shall be present at the public hearing. Notice of such a public hearing shall circulate to the media no less than 10 calendar days before the scheduled public hearing. 2, such notice shall include the time, place, and statement that all are welcome to submit comments and questions regarding the candidacy of the nominees. Members of the commission shall receive compensation in form of a stipend that shall be set in the budget. The Public Safety Commission shall recommend to the mayor a budget for the commission for the Department of Public Safety. The mayor will consider the submission for inclusion in the general budget annually, as prescribed by the charter of the City of Albany. H, the commission may establish advisory committees, standing or ad hoc committees, panels, and/or host forums, and public hearings as the commission deems necessary. In doing so, the commission shall ensure wide and comprehensive representation of the various geographic areas with Albany, with special attention to historically underrepresented areas, and areas that have been with a focus of more police activity. I, the commission shall require individual members to excuse themselves from participating in discussions or decision-making in which any item in the execution of their duties presents a personal, professional, or financial conflict of interest. J, the commission shall appoint a commissioner of public safety who shall head the Department of Public Safety and carry out the functions and duties thereof. The commissioner shall serve and hold such office at the pleasure of the commission. The commissioner shall appoint such deputies, directors, and other subordinates, and shall be authorized by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and who shall serve at the commissioner's pleasure. Okay, now we're into section 42-71.1, powers and duties, overseeing the Albany Police Department. A, policy making authority. The commission shall have the power to make rules, regulations, and policies concerning public safety consistent with the goals set forth in this article. The commission shall have the authority to modify existing Albany Police Department procedures or policies. The commission's authority shall supersede the authority of the chief of police under section 42-6 of the Code of the City of Albany. If the commission identifies a need for legislative action by the Common Council, it shall propose a draft legislation to the council. 3, the commission shall implement the reforms and recommendations of the Albany Policing Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Plan as adopted by the Common Council in Resolution 26.31.21R and any subsequent amendments thereto. 4, the commission shall review and assess any or all policies and practices regarding financial fines, fees, and penalties imposed on people who come into contact with the criminal justice system or any department or office of the city that is involved in public safety, including but not limited to all issues within the purview of the Albany Police Department and the Department of Public Safety. It shall recommend changes in those policies and practices with the goals of ensuring interactions with the City of Albany and its government departments do not affect people unequally on the basis of their economic class, their race, or ethnicity, their immigration status, their ability or disability, or any other protected characteristic. 5, the commission shall also review and assess the accessibility of public safety institutions and practices for persons with disabilities. It shall also assess the need for better language, access for institutions, and issues within the authority. B, commission review of police department policies. If the Albany Police Department seeks to promulgate or modify a rule or policy, including standard operating procedures or standing orders, it shall notify the Public Safety Commission. If the commission takes no action within 15 calendar days, the change shall take effect. If the commission determines the commission consideration or public discussion of the issue is appropriate, however, the commission shall, within 15 calendar days, issue a public notice of its intent to take up the issue. 3, if the chief of police informs the commission that a rule or policy must take immediate effect because of emergency circumstances, the rule or policy may take effect before the 15-day period expires. However, the commission shall have the authority to suspend the rule or policy upon its determination that the commission consideration or public discussion of the issue is appropriate. 4, if there's any question to whether an action by the police department falls under this provision and is subject to review by the commission shall resolve that question. C, under personnel policies and practices, the commission shall set forth departmental practices for the Albany Police Department, Department of Public Safety in recruiting, hiring, promoting, disciplining, and in accordance with statutory authority, may make recommendations to the mayor, to the common council regarding practices, procedures, policy, and planning, along with other criteria the commission deems relevant. The commission shall review training and personnel practices to ensure that violence prevention and de-escalation are sufficiently emphasized. D, relationship with the Community Police Review Board. The Public Safety Commission shall work in conjunction with the Community Police Review Board in accordance of Part 33 of Chapter 42 of this code. When the commission or any employee of the Department of Public Safety becomes aware of any complaint concerning individual misconduct by an employee of the Albany Police Department or identifies an issue of its own initiative, it shall refer the complaint or issue to the Community Police Review Board for investigation. The commission shall share the review board with the review board whatever information that the review board deems relevant. At that, I'm going to stop for a minute. Hold on, because I just went off and reading. We're about halfway through the local law C. I just want to open it up for comment. Do you want to continue on going through it? Do you want to discuss what we've done so far? I'm going to open that up to the committee to hear what people say. Jack, go ahead.
No, I'm all right with you. Keep reading it and finishing it, right? To be honest with you. I mean, I have a bunch of questions that I have throughout the whole thing, but I don't want to stop it and just finish it and then go back. That's just my
There's a lot to cover, and when you're reading it, I realize it. So does anybody else have anything to say? All right, let me just do something real fast. I had to close my office door. Sorry about that. All right, so let's take up section 42-71-2. Powers and duties administering the Department of Public Safety. A, the Commission's authority over Department of Public Safety. The Public Safety Commission's authority to make policies and rules governing public safety shall include, but will not be limited to, policies and rules governing the operations of the Department of Public Safety, as well as rules about whether the Albany Police Department or Department of Public Safety shall assume primary or shared responsibility for responding to specific types of calls or situations. In assessing which department should respond to a given issue, the Commission shall consider any and all factors it deems relevant. B, staff. Department of Public Safety shall have sufficient staff to carry out the responsibilities identified in the statute by the Public Safety Commission. The Public Safety Commission shall have the responsibility for overseeing the operations of the Department of Public Safety and appointing the Commissioner of Public Safety. C, dispatch. Department of Public Safety shall have primary responsibility for answering calls to 911 and dispatching responders. It shall also maintain a way for community members to contact the department directly without calling 911. D, responsibilities of the Department of Public Safety. Department of Public Safety shall have primary responsibility for responding to calls for help involving people experiencing homelessness, mental health issues, including threats of suicide and substance abuse issues. E, Commission must assess appropriate responders. The Public Safety Commission shall further assess and promulgate rules and or policies determining whether the Department of Public Safety should assume primary responsibility for other issues where unarmed response may be feasible and consistent with the goals set forth in this article, including but not limited to disturbances, adolescent disturbances, suspicious persons, trespassing incidents, other quality of life concerns, accidents without injuries, minor theft from purses, cars, and homes, destruction of property, and any criminal matters where it is unlikely that the responders will encounter a violent situation. 2, investigation of crimes. 3, domestic disputes and domestic violence. 4, noise complaints and lower risk conflicts between neighbors, between landlords and tenants, between family members, or between other community members. 5, child abuse. 6, environmental conditions or nuisances. 7, non-criminal traffic violation, road hazards. 8, emergency medical care and first aid. 9, wellness checks. 10, death notifications. 11, transportation to services. 12, crisis counseling. 13, resource connections and referrals. 14, taken reports. 15, any category or issue which the commission determined should be considered. The enumeration of any issues in this subsection shall not be construed to limit the issues which the commission may consider as potentially appropriate for response by the Department of Public Safety. F, facilities. The Department of Public Safety may maintain facilities in the community to help address the issues for which it is responsible. These may include crisis stabilization centers, overdose prevention sites, safe injection facilities. The department may also form and maintain relationships with service providers who maintain such facilities. G, long-term solutions and strategies. The department shall respond to immediate needs and to long-term needs, working to find long-term solutions to the issues it encounters in the community. Along with developing its own long-term strategies for resolution of individual needs, the department shall form relationships with service providers in all relevant areas so that it can refer people to those providers where appropriate. 2, once a referral is made, the department shall follow up to determine whether additional work could help. The department shall ensure that the appropriate personnel follow up on a long-term basis where needed. 3, the department shall report to the Public Safety Commission regularly on the long-term impact of its interventions on individual cases. H, staff. The Department of Public Safety shall employ personnel with skills and background sufficient to allow an effective response to situations for which the department is responsible. It may employ consultants or form relationships with organizations to ensure the successful provision of services. Backgrounds that should be considered by the department include: 1, experience as a paramedic, a clinician, a counselor, a therapist, and a crisis intervention specialist. 2, mediators, credible messengers, i.e. individuals with strong ties to the community, oftentimes with a personal history of overcoming violence or justice systems involvement, who are able to connect to the community residents based on their shared background and experiences, and violence interrupters, outreach workers trained to mediate conflicts before they turn violent. Peer responders, i.e. people who have lived experience of the concerns they respond to, and peer outreach workers, e.g. people who share an experience of housing insecurity. I, relationship with the police department. The Public Safety Department and the Albany Police Department shall collaborate fully with each other. Where necessary, personnel from the Public Safety Department shall request support in responding to a situation from Albany Police Department officers. J, access to records. The Public Safety Department shall have full access to the Albany Police Department records. Department of Public Safety shall have the authority to determine whether to grant access to its own records to the Albany Police Department personnel. The Department of Public Safety shall not grant such access when it would undermine individual or community trust. In the Department of Public Safety, unless the Department of Public Safety determines that there is compelling public safety justification for doing so, and no alternative is available. Okay, we're moving on to section 42, 7-71.3. Powers and duties, and then transparency. A, the Public Safety Commission shall have the primary responsibility for ensuring that the public has access to information about policing and public safety in Albany. The Commission's regulatory shall include the powers to make rules about public access to information. The Albany Police Department and Department of Public Safety shall keep the Public Safety Commission fully informed as to their activities and shall grant the Commission full access to information deemed relevant by the Commission, even if the departments deem the information confidential. The Commission shall have the power to issue subpoenas if necessary to enforce access. C, all video from body-worn cameras, dashboard cameras, and other recording technologies used by the Albany Police Department shall be held in care of the Public Safety Commission. The Commission shall ensure that the Albany Police Department has all the necessary access to those recordings through a system that allows police employees to access the recordings without removing them from the custody of the Commission. D, the Commission shall take custody of other information, recordings, data, and materials as it deems necessary to ensure adequate public transparency and public trust in the quality of information available to the public. E, the Commission shall ensure that statistical information about public safety and police practices is available to the public, including the information required by section 42-5.1 and other statistical information that the Commission deems relevant. It shall further ensure that this information uses plain language, clear explanations, and format comprehensible to non-experts. F, the Public Safety Commission shall have the authority to compel the release of any information it deems appropriate and to require the Albany Police Department or Department of Public Safety to make the information available online. Okay, section 4, section 42-73 is reserved of Article XIA, reserved of Part 3, Department of Public Safety of Chapter 42, Departments and Commissions of Part 1, Administrative Legislation of the Code of Albany is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 42-3, we're striking out reserved. Commissioner of Public Safety. The Commissioner of Public Safety, there shall be appointed by the Commission of Public Safety a Commissioner of Public Safety, who shall head the Department of Public Safety and carry out the functions and duties thereof. The Commissioner shall serve and hold such office at the pleasure of the Commission. The Commissioner shall appoint such deputies, directors, and other subordinates as shall be authorized by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and who shall serve at the Commissioner's pleasure. B, scope, powers, and duties of the Commission. The Commissioner of Public Safety shall collaborate with the chiefs of the Department of Police and Fire to manage selection, appointment, training, and development of police and civilian staff. The Commissioner shall additionally have cognizance, jurisdiction, supervision, and control of disciplinary proceedings within such departments with the authority to impose appropriate sanctions, including reprimand, treatment of training, forfeiture of pay, demotion, and dismissal, and other disciplinary measures as determined by analyzing pre-established rules and guidelines. In carrying out such responsibility, the Commissioner may obtain reviews and evidence, including disciplinary reports, and shall prepare written decisions and instructions regarding finding cases, claims, and disputes related to discipline. The Commissioner shall also prepare and submit plans and credentials necessary to gain or retain state accreditation of such departments. design and conduct performance appraisals. In addition, the commissioner shall possess such other powers and perform such other duties as may be prescribed by local law and in local law or ordinance of the Common Council. Section 5, severability and interpretation. Severability is if any provision of this law or application to any person or circumstance is held invalid, the invalidity does not affect other provisions or applications of this article, which can be given effect without invalid provisions or application. And to this end, the provisions with this law are severable. B, interpretation. The Iusum Generis canon and related principles of interpretation shall be used to interpret this law or to limit the power of Public Safety Commission or the Department of Public Safety. Section 6, this local law shall go into effect upon passage, public hearing, mandatory referendum, and the filing with the Secretary of State. Approved to this form the 11th day of February, 2022. We have 2 other pages? Okay. Okay, yeah, these are just the information. So actually, it's only 10 pages. I thought it was 12. But. All right. Now that I have no voice left and you had to listen to my butchering of the English language and a little bit of Latin there, what do we folks think? Do you want to start? We'll start on certain sections and discuss. We're going to throw it out there to committee members. How do you want to proceed?
I mean, to me, I think I'm sorry, Tom.
No, go ahead. No. Again, I'd like this to be free flowing, and as long as we don't step on each other, let's just jump in.
I mean, I don't know if we want to go to a wording first, or should we try to tackle some of the big issues first? So we can actually, once we get over those big issues, then try to actually get to the differences we may have with the actual document and the word. And I think some of the big issues that have come up that people are concerned with is, one, the funding, where's the money going to come from? I think we need to have a real honest conversation about that. I think there's some who would say it should come from the police department budget. Okay, well, let's have that discussion. Let's have that honest conversation of how much do people want to have taken out from the police department budget? How many officers? How is that going to affect the police department budget? Let's have that honest conversation. Then let's also have the conversation of where else would we want to get the remaining funds if it's not all going to come from that department. Are we looking at increasing taxes for it? Are we looking to use other supplemental funding that may be coming in? How are we going to pay for it? I think that's one subject that is looming. There's a big elephant in the room that I think we should look to tackle. The other one I would say is the accountability, to residents, accountability to community members. I think a lot of this is being designed with the hopes that this commission would be more accountable to residents and to the community than the current system. My concern is that we are handing over a lot of authority to a non-elected body. And I know we've done that before, but I know we've also learned that when we do that, there's consequences that, residents have, and, a fear and a real concern that their voice isn't being heard in the decision-making process when we've done that. So I think that's another big point we need to tackle. I think when we get through those two, which I think are probably the 2 biggest ones, I think then we can go about the, breakdown and a bunch of other stuff that we may have differences in. But I think, to me, I would say we should have a conversation about those, so we can, and that may take more than one meeting.
Oh, yeah.
But
calendar's wide open. We're going to put as many meetings as we need to get this done. So don't hesitate on that. It's important.
Can I jump in and say something?
Go ahead.
So first of all, obviously, if we're creating a public safety commission that's going to take responsibilities away from the police department. So that means that there's going to be funding that's not going to be used by the police department. So that's one thing. But as we go into this discussion and people speak about the public has felt like it hasn't been heard when incidents happen to residents in our city, and then the full story. Let's just say the full story doesn't always hit the surface, and then we end up the public, the people end up having to pay for it because of the situation. So I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago in regards to the church, and I heard it come out of Howard Hubbard's own mouth. While all these incidents were taking place in our city in the Catholic Church, they were more concerned about priesthood. And unfortunately, when people join established organizations, they join these organizations with good, noble men and women. But as time goes on, it becomes more about the institution than it does the people. And this is why we're here right now. Council people didn't just wake up and say, "Listen, we want to change. We want to change how things are done in the police department." Once again, people have advocated. People have called and said, enough of. They had enough of how the old system. And so anytime we encounter change, it's going to automatically be met with some resistance. But we have to have an open mind to understand how things have been done. I'm 50. I'll be 54 next week. In the 53.9 years that I've been here, it's shown that there's flaws in the system.
Hey,
So I just ask as we have this discussion, and let's not approach it from the negatives. Let's look at the positives that this could bring to the table, because some of the things that you spoke about when you're reading the laws, it's a number of us that sit and that's a part of this discussion that have played a number of those roles. It's people that have been police officers that'll tell you that when Derek Johnson was out there, it was things that I could get to and I could assist that they can never do. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a system that will put more people that have those abilities in the community. It's like the community gyms are working in favor of the community, but it's going to be organized and it's going to be structured. So that's
Sure.
what I would ask as we move forward in the discussion. Thank you.
well, thank you, Councilman Johnson. And again,
Can I just
we got to
finish?
look at this. Let me just finish up. I'm sorry. We got to look at this. This is a 10-page law, and we're going to have people for it and against it. But to make any kind of sense out of it, I want us to analyze. As your chair, I'm asking that we examine each section of the law. We talk about it. We discuss it. We're going to hear people for it, people against it. But let's get it out there. Let's have a good conversation. It's important that this law is out there. It's been introduced, and we need to discuss it. What I'm looking for right now is to proceed. Councilman Vallerin has brought up 2 points to talk about. He'd like to discuss funding and accountability, which is good. But I guess my question is there other areas that we need to discuss? We can just do this blindly and just go around, or do we go through each section of the 10 pages? Start page 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you understand this? Is there problems here? And then move forward. So I'm going to shut up at this point. We have committee member Jack Flynn. Go ahead.
No, I totally agree with Alfredo about the funding. I also have questions about a lot of legal questions that this legislation has. I read Councilwoman Keegan's page, and she got a lot of valid points about the legality of this legislation. So I think we got to look at all that before I think we really dive into a lot of the other issues. But that's my take on it.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Okay, I see. Alfredo, let me hit the other members who have their hands up. And then we'll come back to think. Go ahead, Deborah.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. Originally the question was, are we going to go through section by section and sort of wordsmith, or are we going to talk about conceptually the larger ideas and potential impacts of this legislation as a whole? And I hope that the committee decides to focus on that at this early stage rather than wordsmithing. I think the big questions such as what does oversight mean? There's what does oversight, if the commission is going to be charged with oversight of the police department, what does that actually mean? The authority question that Councilmember Ballerin spoke about, funding that's one of our biggest responsibilities, and that's definitely something that we need to discuss. And I also, so I just hope that we can have those discussions prior to going line by line.
Okay, thank you. Megan?
Hi, thank you. And I apologize for being a little late. I just got out of work. Just a couple suggestions. I want to reiterate my support for Alfredo's suggestion of dealing with some of the bigger picture issues. I think that's the more expeditious way to go, because I don't think you can play around with language before you really deal with those issues. Just some suggestions for you guys that may help to resolve some of the funding pieces in this. We are talking about creating an entirely separate public safety commission. However, there is also the potential to tie in some of that oversight role to the CPRB, which is currently already funded. And that may alleviate some of the budgetary concerns related to this legislation. And then secondly, I think it's really incredibly important for people to also understand in the document that I sent you guys out, which governs second-class cities law, which unfortunately is where Albany lies, there are some really specific things that we are responsible for doing in terms of policing in the city under state law. And we really do need to keep that in mind as we're talking about oversight and limitations on the authority of the department. And then sort of lastly, in all of this, when we're talking about funding, for any of you that actually looked at the documentation that was sent out by Jasmine Higgins, that will give you a really clear picture regarding what the anticipated costs for something like this would be. So the Albuquerque program started at around 2.5 million. It's tripled in terms of its budgetary costs in just about 2 years since its implementation. It's now about 7.5 million. You look at the population, we're about 20% the size of Albuquerque, so that would put us right around 1.5 million. The projected costs for Ithaca's program, which again is sort of behind the 8 ball of the City of Albany. The report is essentially what we got from the Police Reinvention Collaboration Report. That is estimating that the Ithaca program would be about 1.5 million for a population that is less than a third of the City of Albany. And that should give you some really good ideas about what we're looking at in terms of costs to move on to the system. And I would hope that we would tie into other types of resources that may be available to be able to do this, such as the expansion of the Accord program from the county. And I would also note that given that this model has use of EMTs, we're talking about adding resources or pulling positions from the fire department. So that's also something that we need to consider in terms of budgetary costs. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
I think Jenny had her hand up before me.
Okay, well, you came up first on my screen, but Ginny, you want to go?
You can go ahead, Gabrielle.
Sure. So I was going to suggest some, I think Alfredo did have a good point that there are concepts that we can talk about maybe. And there are some, at least for me, and I want to open this up to the group, there are some concepts that I really, really like that I think we can focus on and then kind of move forward basing off of our hard lines, I guess. So for example, something that I think is really helpful that is something that's been spoken about in the movement to redefine public safety in the spirit of this legislation is having video from body-worn cameras and dash cam and any recording or video or voice recordings to be held by the Public Safety Commission instead of being held by the police department. And the reasoning for that is that when you have a third party that is able to house all of the media, that it allows for an additional line of protection, so to speak, so that there's this third party that's the one that's housing, taking, dispersing it as well. I do think that that could potentially be a concern logistically with the public, as the public defender and with the DA's office. And I'm curious if we can involve them in the conversation as well when we get there, because I'm not sure how that information would be necessarily distributed to us. But that was something that I personally liked. I'm not sure if anyone else has like pieces that they really like. And maybe we can start with the pieces that we like, and then we can kind of identify then the things that we need to chew on a little bit more. So I like Alfredo's suggestion by taking it piecemeal like that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. I wanted to, I think Tom saying that it's going to be like, clear your calendar because this is a big discussion is absolutely correct. And I also think it makes a lot of sense to talk about the bigger concepts before digging into language, because the purpose of the language is really to do what we would like it to do. So we can wordsmith it, and then, but if the intent is different than the actual language, then we just wasted a lot of time. So my recommendation would be to kind of come up with some of those bigger picture ideas, and then maybe have specific meetings based on those ideas with professionals that are impacted by that. If we're talking about mental health, bring in some of the providers and see if we're able to actually bring people into the conversation. If we're talking about dispatch, we should probably talk to some dispatch people. While some of us are professionals in these areas, I clearly am not, but others are or were. Most of us are not. So we really, I think if we're doing something big like this, it's important to include as many professionals as we can through the conversations. We might not agree with what they have to say, but I think it's important to hear them. And I also would say in terms of budget, while I obviously agree that it is one of the most important parts of our conversation, you also can't create a budget until you know what you're spending money on. So I think it would be really difficult to come up with we're obviously talking about a giant budget hit. I think that we're all aware of that. And I shouldn't say hit, but it's going to have it's not going to be inexpensive, what we're looking at. And so I think having that understanding, but I think it'd be helpful to know exactly what we're going, it's hard to come up with that if we don't know what we're spending it on. And as we work through the process, we might say, oh, we don't need whatever this thing is. So that would impact the budget, make it less, or maybe it's something that it's phased in. So, but we wouldn't really know that until we dig in. It's entirely possible that we'd be able to say, you know what, we're going to be able to phase this in over 5 years, and then the cost each year is this. We don't know that until we're there. Or we might say, we need to do this right away, and this is the budget cost, and we need to figure that out. But again, I think that we have a lot of other conversations to have first, with the full understanding that obviously the budget needs to be a very important part of the conversation, but at least let's wrap our arms around what that is. Because you can make up numbers, but it's it's better to work with as much hard numbers as you can. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. And, we brought up, it was, the CPRB was brought up, and it's very underfunded from what I've seen in other cities, and talking to the Center for Law and Justice. I can't remember, that helped set
Are
up.
you saying the numbers? Was it Rochester? It's like
Yeah, it's
Like
we're
$5 million or something. I mean, Rochester is a bigger city, but it's not that much
only by
bigger, so-
50,000 though.
Yeah.
Or is it 100? Well,
My-
it might be double, but still.
I mean, my
It's-
suggestion was merely based upon the fact that we already have written into the charter now via referendum a pool of money that's going into the CPRB. I think it's now something like 400,000 as that law went into effect. So if we're talking about creating kind of an oversight body, which essentially is what their role already is. I mean, one of my concerns with this is now we have a third group that the police department has to deal with, who don't necessarily all have the same agenda. And that the police department is supposed to be somewhat answerable to. And in terms of that piece of this legislation that talks about providing stipends to that commission, it's not going to offset an incredible amount of the budget, because the bulk of the budget really has to do with the civilian personnel piece of this. But to me, that may be a really good fit if we look at what that commission is a little bit differently, is my only suggestion. Because you may find that funding stream is adequate to do that. And I certainly would support that if we're going to add responsibilities onto the CPRB, that they should be compensated as such. That's a significant time commitment on their end. That's all.
Yeah, no, and you made a good point. I mean, and one of the problems with the CPRB is who does the investigation, and hiring, private investigators, have an office, who's going to pay for the office space, having secure office space. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. But we got to move forward. We got legislation. I'd love to hear from some other committee members. I know Alfredo. Oh, Gabrielle, do you have your hand up, or is that from before?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
have my hand up. I think it was Council Member Farrell that mentioned having like separate committees to go over some of these things. And I would actually kind of suggest that the Police Reform Collaborative subcommittees like already did a lot of this work and like really worked all summer to investigate and discuss and bring these conversations back. So I don't want to like redo a lot of the work that has been done. And I think that to a certain extent, reading over those reports or maybe reaching out to those committees that have already done this work could be helpful if we want to get additional information, but creating subcommittees within the council to address some of this stuff, I think for some topics might be repetitive because people within the city have already done that work. And then I wanted to just, while we're on this discussion about the CPRB, advocate for its like complete independence. And I think that they do like investigative work for police complaints, and that should be like their main function. And it's good that that's all they do, because that takes up all of their work and all of their time already. I just feel like giving them additional responsibilities might be might kind of detract from the spirit of what a CPRB is, which is like a really independent body. That's just my 2 cents while we're talking about where CPRB stuff goes. And I don't mind like forwarding those reports to people too. They're really, really helpful. And I've personally reached out to people that were within all of that work. So I think that they could be helpful for just learning more.
Can I just clarify? I in no way was saying we should do subcommittees at all. I think that's a terrible idea.
Okay, good.
That is not at all what I was saying. I was saying that we should do big subject areas and have meetings focused on those subject areas. Absolutely. The collaborative was an incredible process. and bringing in those subcommittee groups. I think that the subcommittee group I was on would absolutely love to participate in a
Great.
council specific meeting, but I in no way think that we should. I think that we need to meet as a body on this, and subcommittees would completely, that I don't think that's a good idea, but I do think it's a good idea for us to have subject specific committee meeting, like a public committee meeting, public safety committee meeting based on one specific area, so that we can really bring in people that have knowledge of that area, and even potentially work on language. If it's a specific area that it makes sense to work on language, great. But I do think that's a good idea, but I do not think subcommittees is a good idea.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'd like to bring, Jenny, when we get to a certain point, it'd be good to have the finance committee somehow involved, in my mind, that, that we could plan or whatever, but that's way
I
down
would
the road.
agree with that, but I'm fortunately no longer the chair of that.
Okay, oh, that's right.
Thrilled that Sonia is amazing, and
Yeah.
but I'm sure she would also love to participate in that.
But it's one of the things, looking at you made me think of finance. So, but it's one of the things. So I'd love to hear from, we heard from Jack. Kelly, do you have any input that you could give us, direction?
Yeah, no, not so much direction, just as long as we're thoughtful, have lengthy and wholehearted discussions with the folks that we represent, people of Albany, include them in the conversation, be thoughtful. We're not all going to agree on everything, but again, it's important to get input from everyone, we should be inviting folks that we know disagree, as well as people that we know side with us, and just get their feelings and thoughts on it. There's a lot here. Having spent a little time with the police department here in the city, talk about transformative. This would be changing all of this stuff around. Again, I know that's what we were looking for going into the police reform conversation that started a number of years back. And again, as long as we touch all the bases, include all the folks that need to be included, and be open and honest and transparent about it, which, I mean, you seem like you're over the top and wanting to do that. I think we'll be fine. None of us have all the answers. It's just important to speak and say what we think, but also to listen to people that are outside of this. So I mean, that would be my advice, and we're well on our way to that. So plenty of meetings. I made the mistake last council with the tear gas conversation and not having lengthy enough discussions. It doesn't look like that's going to happen here, and just be thoughtful as we move forward. I think that's all I got.
Thanks, Kelly. Corey, would you like, since this is kind of around your vision, so let's
Well,
talk
yeah,
about how to move forward.
I think there's two things I want to say, and just quickly. One, I don't see the commission being the same as CPRB. The CPRB's power and authority is to investigate citizens' complaints of police misconduct. That's totally separate than from the commission's vision of looking at public safety and police policies and procedures. So I think those are two separate entities. The first thing. Second thing, I'm going to reiterate this. The public safety department was not added until this year because of having, when Mr. Conti put it forward to the council last year, once we saw in the budget there was a public safety commissioner, the thought was, oh, we would need a department, right? So that's how the department has gotten in this local law. If members are saying they don't believe we need a department, but we can establish a commission with a public safety commissioner, that's a different conversation, right? But I haven't heard anybody, they keep talking about money, 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 but I haven't heard any council members talk about there is a public safety commissioner in our budget. If you don't agree, if you don't think we need a department, okay. If we establish a commission with the public safety commissioner without a department, I'm pretty sure the sponsor of the legislation and the people who came up with the legislation who helped craft it, I don't think that is an issue. But I haven't heard any council members talk about that aspect of it. Why it was included. It was included because there was a public safety commissioner in the budget. If council members feel we don't need a department to do that, so to speak, then that's a different discussion.
That'll be a big discussion.
And I'm looking to hear, I've been open about why it was put in there. And we keep talking about, well, it's going to cost this, we're going to cost this. Well, we have to talk about there was a public safety commissioner's job title put in the budget. If the council feels it doesn't need a department, so be it. But I haven't heard anybody say that. I just hear people talking about how much it's going to cost. I'd like to know the feelings of the council.
Well, I mean, I do think that in the comments that I submitted to you guys in advance, I did discuss the issue around public safety department, public safety commission, when you look into how that's codified in state law as it pertains to second class cities law and what that responsibility would be and who that would cover as opposed to how it's laid out in this specific piece of legislation, and requested that we have Corp Counsel or our research council really dig into what that department would have to be if that's what we establish. I mean, that's why I put those questions into my comments back, Corey, just to give you that context of really looking at how these are set up in other municipalities and what their authority is and what their oversight is. Because my concern is that when you look at that, you're essentially almost setting up a separate mayoral system that's not elected in the way that we structured this legislation. And I'm not 100% comfortable with that per se. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we've heard from you. I haven't heard anybody else talk about, do we need a department or don't we? Like, you were clear, crystal clear. But that's one council member.
Go ahead, Alfredo.
Thank you. So, I mean, Corey, we're looking at the legislation that's in front of us. So that's why we're discussing it. If we take out the department, that does solve a lot of the financial issues. But at the same time, is it as, transformative? Is it as, does it have a lot of points that, people would like to see? So, let's have that conversation. But I think, we've got to be honest. And I think we are being honest. Let me just say that. I don't think anyone's not. I think we're having a good conversation, which is good, which is my whole point of starting the conversation was we got to have this conversation and we got to get it out there. But if that's something, if I would suggest we look at the numbers, try to figure out the numbers, find out where the numbers would go, and then have a vote based on those, all of the information out there. Let's have all of the information out there of what the estimated numbers would cost to actually do it the way it's written down. Then we can go nitpick about what we don't like and do like about the authority and the, so forth and so forth. That's a whole other subject. But for me, I'd like to have all the information about if we were to do it this way, how are we going to fund it? How is it going to be ran? How is it going to look? And then maybe we shouldn't do it this way because we can't afford it, because it's more than what our budget can handle. But that would be my suggestion. I think
so.
Got this in front of us. Let's look at everything honestly and openly.
So what I heard you say is that you don't want to have a discussion about whether we need a department or not unless you see the money aspect of it. Because we wouldn't even be talking about police department. I mean, a department, public safety department, if that line wasn't put and Richard didn't bring up, well, we have a public safety commissioner in the budget, it should fall under the department. We wouldn't even be talking about it. We'd just be talking about the function of a commission
Yeah, and that's
and
very
establishing a public safety commission, which
And
is totally, you know,
that's very different than what we have in front of us. What we have in front of us is
I know.
like a whole separate department, staffing, different entities.
But I think the answer, I think council members, I think, I mean, Ms. Keegan was clear on her position. I think council members should answer that question. Do you, if you feel it doesn't, we don't need a department, right? Then let's deal with the commission, the public safety commissioner separate. But to say, let's see how much it's going to cost first. I mean, I think it's not about the cost. It's about what is the intent of the council as a whole. Ms. Keegan brought up, I believe last time she talked about when I brought it up, she had said, well, according to state law, you don't need a department to establish the public safety commissioner. I believe I'm correct on that, or referring to that. And that's when I stated, well, the department was put in there because it was believed that you needed a department because there was a public safety commissioner in the budget.
So
But
Can I just help with a little of the history?
Yeah.
Because Corey is absolutely right. We used to have a public safety department. And that's why Richard decided to bring it back, because it just made it cleaner. A commissioner is head of a department. So it was really because of the title. And also it was something that was pretty easy to do because we used to have a public safety department. So I just wanted to, just food for thought, because Corey's right. That's something to think about, and just a little history.
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's, I mean, the intent, the council members should think about the intent. Okay, do we need a department? If they say yes, then you go through that process, how much it's going to cost, where it's going to be funded. If you don't, then you deal with the language of the commission and whether you're for having an independent commission helping oversee public safety.
But also, as it relates to the commissioner's position, without a department, then the mayor has control over that position without council input. So we needed the department in there to be able to have some say. So that was a part of it also.
Okay.
Go ahead, Deb.
But that was pretty much my question, was to clarify. You said, I appreciated the history a little bit, Ginny. But we're not creating a department just because we can, just because we used to have a public safety department. There has to be, well, there, right? I mean, that's not the point.
In the commission, this local law, you know, it evolved into this. This local law didn't even have a public safety commissioner. It was going to be the commission would appoint an exec director. But once that was put in the budget, it was like, okay, if this is the way the city administration wants to go, then we have to create this department who has a public safety commissioner and have the commission, you know, help oversee that department.
Do we have
But the
to
real
have a
intent is,
commissioner?
can I just, I'm sorry, just to clarify, but the real intent is to create an independent body, an independent
Yes.
department, independent of the executive, not really independent of the legislature, not really independent of the common council, though. I mean, that's the point, right?
have any of you
Is to
guys, like,
create but go ahead, Megan.
I guess, like, have any of you guys like actually looked at how public safety departments function across the state? Because I did a lot of research on it. it generally doesn't necessarily appear in cities where you have a strong mayoral form of government. It's typically more in a city manager style of government where
Right, which is,
the
I think, the
council has the
that's the
authority.
point of
And
this. Yeah,
The public safety commissioner typically in those cities has at least oversight of the police department and the fire department, as well as sometimes other components of whatever services are being provided by that city. Like arguably you could say DGS, you could say the water authority. And that's one of the reasons why I asked for that to be a little bit more fleshed out. So they don't necessarily have like a flushed out public safety department in the way that we are legislating it here. They have a public safety commissioner who oversees the chief of police and the fire chief in the way that our mayor currently does.
yes, right.
And then
So wait, just so I can finish, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Megan. I would like, has anybody had the discussion with the mayor's office about, I mean, I wasn't a member when the public safety commissioner position was put in the budget. I paid attention as much as I could, but what was the rationale from the administration with that?
It's actually from my non-professional in this area opinion, it was a weird title for it, but it really is more of a function of almost like overseeing different like judicial things that are happening within. So they were looking for like, it's a part-time position because they were thinking it'd be like a retired judge that would kind of come in. I don't know, maybe there's just not a lot of titles for this position, but it wasn't necessarily what one would think of as a public safety commissioner.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jenny. And what I had heard is that under the Second Cities law, that the commissioner, we don't have to have independent arbitration for police cases, and that there's a frustration in the city that they lost a couple of cases. They've won some cases too, but they want, they want to have total control. If there's a bad actor out there, guaranteed to get them out, whether they prove it or not beyond the reasonable doubt, or however they do it with an arbitrator. But that's what I heard. And for a part-time position.
And there's one in Schenectady too. So there's this similar position. I don't know if it's the same title. I believe it's in Schenectady. So they were kind of modeling it after that. So that was the concept behind what was put in the budget.
Yeah, I believe you guys are correct. It has to do with moving discipline away from the current arbitrator system and into what the city would have to establish in order to handle discipline cases in-house. Which again, all of the case law involving those disciplinary issues is based upon municipalities that had a public safety commissioner doing that work. So it's just.
In my mind, what we're talking about, I think that position kind of drove some of this like the language in this legislation. What we're really looking at is a very different thing. And I also don't think it necessarily minimizes the need for that position. Regardless of title, I think the concept is a sound concept, but I think it's I think it drove some things within this legislation, but it's not necessarily what we're discussing.
We would have to tie that piece into this legislation in order to do what the city is looking to do. And I have been told in conversations that the current arbitrator that's assigned is not very friendly to anyone that is trying to do new policing policy and new policing reform, and that process has been very difficult for them to get them through to get rid of bad actors on the force. And so I think in any discussion that we're having in terms of wanting to meet the needs of the community and what the community is asking for, ensuring that any disciplinary action that we take, I think it should still be a fair process and that they should have a right to grieve and all of those things. But that is going to be a huge component around any impact that we have. And so I think it is critically important that that is considered in how we consider this legislation.
Corey, before you left, I had a fast question for you. With the public safety commissioner, that didn't, by the council approving the budget, is that how that position was created? Or, you know, I'm just curious
No,
how
the
that
mayor
position came up.
the mayor put it in the budget. That was it.
Okay, so we don't have
The
any
mayor put
say.
it in the budget,
So,
and that triggered this.
so
Okay.
can I jump? Can I
That
jump in?
triggered this. There was really no conversation. So once we saw in the budget, we're like, okay, to have some oversight over this position, we have to create this. If council members don't want an oversight, oh, that's fine. That's why we're having this conversation. But go ahead, Mr. Johnson. Sorry.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say, once again, the people spoke. The people made a whole bunch of noise, and you got to remember, some of us have lived here our whole lives, and you know, we lived under the public safety commissioner of the past, and that didn't work because it was in alignment with the mayor's office. So you had two people that were making decisions for the city that were both talking to the mayor, and it was mayor led. And so in Albany, yes, people have elected a mayor, but if you look at the numbers are you know, going in the opposite direction. So I just will say, this work that we're doing is much needed, and you know, anytime you're doing something new, it's going to be met with resistance. But what I ask of my colleagues is that we don't do a lot of back and forth, you know, asking for certain things, and then at the end, you're not going to support it. That isn't working with each other. So I just want us to be mindful that each day that we wake up, it's unfortunate situations that happen in our city that ultimately we have to deal with. And for far too long, the institutions were getting the high consideration more than the residents were. And so change is inevitable in this point, and we have to go in a direction that sends a message to the people that we're listening. And as far as the language, I think that you know, when a person is handling eggs, they don't worry about how the egg is going to be cooked. They want to get the egg hatched first. So let's put the work into putting the understanding and meeting of the mind so we can get to the numbers part. Because if we go to the numbers first, it may discourage people, and you don't get to see the full benefit of what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is just, you know, respond to the people's call that, you know, this old system is broke. And in doing so, we may create an atmosphere for the relationship between APD and the city residents to grow in an area that has never grown. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Derek. So it's 6:44. I had said hard stop at 6:45, but I'm willing to hang on if people want to discuss more. Can I get like a show of hands if you'd like this continue the discussion?
I had to jump off for Kana, so I gotta go.
All
Sorry.
right, no worries. So we'll stay on for a bit longer then. Thank you.
Right, can I just add this in terms of the public safety commissioner, that it appeared in the budget, the mayor put it there. I think at some point maybe we should get the mayor or her folks in here to say, hey, what they envision when they proposed it. But for our end of it, Mr. Conti, in his infinite wisdom, and he understands his stuff more intricately than any of us do, said, hey, there's a commissioner there and no department. So he said we need to attach a department to that so we can have as a council some control over that. And I think that without going back and rehashing everything, there was a certain level of distrust with that. But in the end, looking back, we should have followed his advice and actually took that step. But I mean, we're where we are now, and we're trying to work through this stuff. And so that again, that's again, getting someone from the administration and to maybe ask what their vision, what do they propose the person does, whatever. I mean, there's a job description associated with it, whatever, but you could ask for their intention with creating it. So just.
Well, I
Sorry
think
to interrupt. I think that would
they
be
told us
great.
their intention
I just
was
have
to
to,
oversee.
I'm sorry, Mr. President.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have to run. I'm going to Temple Israel for a Ukraine rally, which I wanted to say because it's something else that's important. I really appreciate this discussion. I really appreciate what Kelly just said, and I look forward to more discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the response, Kelly, their intent, we were told their intent was the public safety commissioner would oversee the recommendations that came from the police implementation. That directly contradicted what the community wanted. The community didn't say they wanted a public safety commissioner overseen by the executive branch of government. And the community didn't say they wanted a public safety commissioner overseen by the police department. The community said we need an independent public safety commission. So they were clear why they put it there. It was to oversee the implementations of, and what the community wanted was they wanted a commission to take those responsibilities to oversee and make sure certain suggestions, because some of the suggestions doesn't fall under like the Public Safety Commission. Some of those suggestions fall under CPRB, some of the suggestions. So there was a number of suggestions that would, they wanted a commission to overlook and see those things that were suggested and work to implement those things under a separate entity. And that's what the commission. I continue to hear people say, well, the commission, who's going to do the work of this? The commission is going to figure out these appointments would figure out, okay, how do we decouple some of the job duties that our police officers does? They would bring in people, they would talk to the police department. Okay, what are some of the things that you do now? When people, I'm just going to use this example. When people talk about mental health, that would be a discussion that commission would have with the police department, mental health professionals. You would believe or hope they would, and say, okay, based off of what we know, this is the system that could be set up in the city of Albany. If other entities are doing it, if the county started something, the commission would say, okay, if the county is doing it this way, then that might be something the commission, blah, blah, blah. I look at the commission as a body of people who is going to really delve into the things we need to put in place that decouples certain functions, that deals with public safety, that doesn't deal with law enforcement, decoupling that out of law enforcement and figuring out how does that move forward.
Okay, I gotta jump in real fast because I'm gonna lose one of our committee members. For the committee, we're gonna meet again. We're trying to set up a meeting on the 20th of April. It'll have to be in person. So do you want me for this next meeting? Do we want to invite the mayor or the mayor's staff to come in and talk about what we just discussed? Is that good with everybody? Just show me your hand.
Yeah, Tom, I'd like to invite anybody who's going to deal with the finances of this committee.
Budget director. We can invite
Whether
Nick.
whether it's Nick or Darius,
Okay,
whoever.
so I'm going to invite the finances and the executive branch. Somebody from there.
And maybe the budget director and whoever from the executive that would care to participate and kind of explain. Not that they have to give us an explanation, but yeah, anyone that can fill in the blanks that we're talking about right now, fine. The finance piece and the other piece, but Mick Blaze obviously as the budget director would be helpful in that.
Okay, hey, Ethan, you're getting all
you-
this, right? Okay, good. I'm sorry, go
If
ahead.
you don't- just a suggestion. I think this is something that people mentioned before, and Corey also, President Ellis also mentioned before too, that like the finances are important, but we don't even know what we're doing yet before we even get a financial analysis.
Thank
I just
you.
feel like and I don't want to
It's correct.
so important that we do that. It's just a matter of like, let's maybe if we hash out the language first and like kind of identify what it is that we're trying to do and then get finances, because we know respectfully, like we know that people are going to come in and be like, this is too expensive and like we can't do this. And so all right, Corey, we got
What would be important though is to find out why this position was created. And that's what I was looking for most importantly. So I mean, whatever you want to, we can talk further on who we want to invite.
But maybe for the public, for the people that are watching and just kind of going forward, to focus our committees on different sections, and then invite the people from the Police Reform Collaborative that have done this work so that we can start working on the language and like working on the things that we want to do. I think we have at least a quorum of the Public Safety Committee, and maybe Sonia can be involved in the discussion as well of like what topics you guys want to address first, and who you want to invite, and like what type of things we should start tackling, because this, as we all know, this is such a large piece of legislation that it's good to get to the meat as soon as possible.
Yeah,
that's my suggestion.
Tom, I agree with her too. I think we should get some of the police collaborative groups, whoever, who. That's my take.
Okay.
I've got no problem with that, but I really think we need to tackle the money. And maybe that's just me from coming from not having a lot of money.
You're from finance too. Yeah.
And just money always being a barrier for things that people want and opportunities. So I want to get that on the table, because I don't want us to be looking at, I don't want us to be looking at the Rolls Royce when all we can afford is the Chevy. Chevy may not be bad though, if we can get to the Chevy. But I want us just to be realistic of what are the numbers and how they're impacted. Because I think I don't want us to let.
But I don't understand what numbers you're looking for unless you want somebody from finance says this is how much a department would cost.
Well, I'd like it. Yeah.
I mean, because
I like that.
I don't think that's a finance. I don't think that's a finance meeting. I think that's okay. What would a department cost? This is what it would cost. If you want to staff it, if you have a commissioner, if you have I don't think that's a long. My feeling is this. I understand, but I think a lot of things we're asking is an email away. It's not a discussion. It's not a long discussion. I agree with Councilwoman Romero. The first is an intent of what it's going to be. Once you know the intent, then you can look at, okay, what is the cost? But to come up with just a cost, I mean, finance can tell you if they're going to ask, well, is it going to be a commissioner, deputy commissioner, blah, blah, blah. They can come up with a number. It's like, this is what it would cost.
Yeah. Right. Yeah,
that number. So let's get that number.
That's not a discussion.
Right.
That's just this what it costs.
So let's get that number and let's have a conversation about that number. Because once we have a conversation about that number and we have a conversation about where we want to see those funds come from, we can have a real much more honest conversation about the rest of the documentation versus that being the elephant in the room. It's
but
like
I wouldn't want to have a conversation unless council members agree that there should be a department. If council members agree, then we move forward. We should not, I would never make a decision based on, well, if it's feasible to cost, yeah, it should have a department. No, fundamentally, do you think there should be a public safety department? If you say yes, then that means, okay, how much would that cost? Right, if you say no, then we don't need to even deal with cost.
Right, but I disagree because a part of agreeing on whether or not we move forward with it it's cost. Again, it's
Okay.
it,
That's what a
Really,
public safety
because,
department, not a commission, because
it-
there's two different things.
You're right about that. The two
Okay.
different, they're two different things. Yes.
Gotcha.
Hey, I'm gonna throw something in. What about the cost, the money we're gonna save from lawsuits? How many millions are we paying a year
right.
in lawsuits that, because of misconduct,
Yeah.
because we don't have, city being sued.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Right,
money's,
It
there's a
is,
lot of things.
right, but unfortunately, you don't know the cost of a lawsuit that never gets filed. So
Yeah.
it's one of those crazy things. I mean, you can look at the history and kind of guesstimate and say, well, this is what we're paying out every year for this, that, and the other. But I apologize for that, Tom.
Don't worry about it.
That ding, I got to get it turned off. But again, this is all legitimate. These are all legitimate topics for discussion, and it should be weighed in. I disagree that we should talk about budget on the back end. I think it should be a part of at least a cursory, like a consideration in the early parts of the discussion. What ballparking, trying to figure out. We have to figure out who does what, how we pay for what. I mean, that's a part I think of being responsible for the stuff that we make decisions on. Again, it doesn't have to be a spot on figure. It's just ballparking and saying, well, maybe it'll cost this much or whatever. But I mean, that's just my thoughts, and maybe other members will disagree, but I think it's definitely relevant, because if you look at our budgets, public safety is our budget or any city's budget, any municipality's budget. Public safety is like the top responsibility and usually the largest part of the budget, and so we have to think about that.
I just think it would not, I don't feel it's an honest, real conversation if we're not bringing in the cost to it, and that's just my opinion. I think we have to bring in what's going to cost and how we're going to fund it if we're going to have an honest, real conversation about making this a reality versus making it a hope. So that's my 2 cents.
And, we got to figure out, are we going to do a department or not, Alfredo? And I mean, there's a lot of variables, what functionality and stuff that we're going to have. So I think we can do both at the same time, or one just a little bit ahead of the other. But I agree that for, especially when our citizens get to vote on this, they're going to want to know, what's this going to cost? So we got to discuss stuff. I mean, that's the bottom line. Well, I think everybody we're losing people left and right. Before I lose my quorum, do I have a motion to adjourn till, I guess, the 20th? I'm open.
I'll make a motion.
Got it. And Alfredo second. And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Thank you all for hanging out and good discussion so far. And we got a lot more. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.